Now, with respect to rights, my mind, just for whatever reason, I mean, even though we're in Canada, I go to the concept of property rights and inalienable rights. But so much of today's conversation seems to be expanding this definition that is very, I would argue, muddy and lacks some sort of fundamental principles as to, well, what is a right and what isn't. Whereas inalienable rights, property rights to me are very sound, sort of principled. So for the listener, how would you sort of lay out what is a right versus, again, what I'm saying, where it seems like society or some people within the political sphere are expanding, oh, this is a right, high-speed internet is a right. It's expanding outside of any sort of principle concept.
I think that really is problematic. And when it becomes something for you to have a right to something that I have to help pay for, it starts to take away from my rights. Mm-hmm. So we need to think about what are individual rights. And I think it's important that I don't have the right to harm somebody else, but I shouldn't have to help pay for somebody else to do something. And that, we can think about that from, that there are certain government programs that help other individuals. And some people think those social programs are wonderful and other people maybe not so much. There are a lot of people that help other people through charitable institutions and charitable foundations. But the thought that government comes out and says, well, you have the right. I mean, let's just say, you have the right to, everybody has the right to a Mercedes-Benz. Well, who's going to pay for that? And suddenly that takes away my rights because now I have to help pay for that for somebody else. And so I think we need to think about sort of that reciprocity when we're talking about those rights. Are those rights that I can just make my choices for myself, or am I asking for rights that are actually impacting somebody else and making somebody else pay for me? And that's where I sort of look at that bottom line as to what really is a right and what is not a right. What is maybe something that we want? It's a desire. It might help make our lives better, and maybe even we all agree that it would be good for everybody to have clean water. But is that really an inalienable right, or is that just something that we'd like to see happen so that more people can live a better, more healthy life?
Would you say a good distinction then is sort of falling into the category of negative rights versus positive rights? And the way I would think about it is negative sort of is protecting me and preventing people, versus the positive is sort of a claim to something that requires, as you sort of put it, cooperation or other people's input.
I think that is exactly sort of where I'm going with that, in the sense of I don't think we should have those positive rights that are actually impacting, that one person has to pay for another person. I don't think individuals have a right to claim part of somebody else's right.
Yeah.
No, that's deep. Because I guess I'm looking at it from, especially, where some people would say, okay, well, shouldn't we force people to help each other? Because if you don't force people, then no one's going to help anybody, and then everybody suffers.
I disagree with that. I think that most people like to help other people because we find it beneficial and self-gratifying to help other people. And if you go back in time, before we had government social programs that were helping people, we had a lot more fraternal programs and churches that people were members of that helped each other. We had a lot more neighborly programs that helped each other. And if you imagine going back without having these government programs that are helping, that are socially helping individuals, and maybe we're giving people payouts and other things, it changes the incentives. If that's not there, suddenly I may not be a jerk to my neighbor because I might need my neighbor to help me out because government's not going to, right? Or I might join a church or be a member of the Elks Club because then I have a group of people that will actually help me out. And I'm going to be willing to help them out because I want to make sure that I have that safety net as well. So it changes the behavior of people. And if you look over time, we've actually seen increasing government programs and decreasing memberships in our fraternal societies and with our church and religious groups as well. I'm not saying that is definitely a causation, but there is a correlation there nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I usually refer to it as, these government programs and things like that have changed the incentives such that we stop living in community. Or like I think about it even in my own neighborhood, like how many of your neighbors do you actually know? Whereas, and obviously trying to compare to 100 years ago is a bit of apples to oranges, but we used to live in community. Whereas today, it's your community is wherever the group of people you decide to sort of, drive to, or I guess in today's world, Zoom call with. But the locality of your community, while there's an aspect where that's good, I think the question that I always pose is how much is this due to the incentives where I no longer am required to provide for my neighbor. I look at the bum on the street and go, well, there's a program for that guy, as opposed to thinking of a personal responsibility piece.
I think that's exactly right. And I think we would see more people actually reaching out to help each other with fewer government programs. I don't think you're able to, at this point in time, especially given COVID, to pull some of those programs out from under people because they rely on them at this point. And government has done a lot of things to put people out of work. And that situation in itself is...
To hear the rest of the discussion, click the YouTube link. For the full episode, go to sixthsensereport.com. And remember, 6 cents makes change.